foreigners should go back to their own country. That's what we heard from some British people during the riots taking place in the UK, because they are claiming that they are losing their country because foreigners are taking over everything. Foreigners are stealing their jobs, committing crimes, and refusing to assimilate and adopt British values. Therefore, as a consequence of all that, they would prefer to see foreigners back in their own countries. But strangely enough, this doesn't seem to apply to white people who were born and raised in Africa or in other Commonwealth countries. But to be fair, this melody isn't new, and it's not just in Western countries. Because if you remember, even within the African continent, just a few years ago, even up until now, you do have African citizens in their own country who accuse other African nationals of the same things, but just with a few variations. However, another strange occurrence is that we have that energy for fellow Africans, but we never do for Europeans, Asians, and Arabs who live among us on the continent. Probably because they carry the UECC card, which stands for the Untouchable Eternal Complexion card, despite them also committing crimes on the African continent. I mean, historically speaking, Arabs and Europeans in that order are the two groups of foreigners who carry the Olympic flame of the most crimes committed on African soil. But the Untouchable Eternal Complexion card is fully activated, so we can't go there. It's off limits. Except for France, whose card was recently deactivated in some West African countries. However, still, even there, African people are still able to differentiate between the French public and the French elite, or the French government, if you will. I say that to say this. The reason why refugees and asylum seekers choose Britain is simply because the UK signed the 1951 Refugee Convention, which gives people the right to seek refuge in any signatory country they choose, and the UK is one of the destinations. But because the UK is an island surrounded by water, there are only three possible ways to enter: by plane, train, or boats. Meaning you can't just walk in like from Luxembourg to Belgium or France to Switzerland. Now, based on the 2023 rankings of the largest refugee hosting countries, the UK didn't even make it to the top 15, it's number 20. However, the way the British media and politicians like to put a spin on immigration, you'd think the UK is leading in this field. And the usual suspects, the media and politicians, are always the one instigating division by creating the perfect environment for such riots to take place. Anyways, in other words, the solution for British people who cannot stand having refugees in their land is to organize and lobby their public officials to withdraw Britain's signature from that convention. Yes, it is as simple as that, and it doesn't involve scaring or hurting people who are seeking help in your land. But in doing so, I hope you never find yourself in their shoes. And now you are just left with a migrant, just like after World War II. People from overseas are recruited and allowed to enter the UK by the British government due to the shortage of staff in the National Healthcare Service and probably in other sectors, especially in the care department. And guess who's the main beneficiary of all this arrangement? Yes, the British public. Now, as an African, I understand why some people might feel like their world is ending, but it's just a feeling, and I can tell you that for free. It is just a feeling, because they've not experienced being forced to abandon their indigenous belief systems by attaching them to a foreign religion or to a rope on a tree after beating their souls out of them just simply for refusing to give up their belief systems. I mean, they've not experienced being brutally coerced to abandon their way of life, culture, and language in order to adopt a foreign language, culture, and an alien way of life, to the point that today someone can travel from the UK and go to some African countries and not completely feel lost because they speak the same language. Worse, they even share the same names. And contrary to popular belief, this didn't happen as a result of a student exchange program. You see, that's why you sometimes find that people tend to choose your country instead of the next one, because you have so much in common. Look, for example, the majority of black players who represent the French football team, you find that their parents are originally from countries that France once brutally colonized. Now, that was France, but you can now apply it to your country. I mean, have the rioters experienced having massive chunks of their land stolen from them by foreigners and then years later being offered to buy it back at the price imposed by the thieves? But worse, many of those who stole the land from indigenous people still own those land up until today, as you are watching this video. But let me bring it closer to home. What can we say about the stolen African artifacts that are exhibited in museums where they do not belong, and those who stole them are still refusing to give it back to its rightful owners up until today? How many of those foreigners who they claim are taking over their countries have military bases in Britain backed by their government at home that will protect and not hesitate to sneakily extract them out of the country to evade British justice after they've committed serious crimes? How many times those foreigners imposed regime change on the British public or meddled into the British politics to tell the British people how to live their lives? You see, it is because I understand what they are saying that I think they are overreacting because they haven't lost anything compared to places where the British government has set foot in the past. Also, losing means someone is winning because clearly, who's winning? Because clearly it's not the foreigners. So who is winning and who's benefiting from all this? I mean, how do you even begin to blame foreigners for the never-ending rising bills, petrol, electricity, food, and the cost of living? How do you blame foreigners when your politicians have money for war, but at home they talk about austerity measures? I mean, how do you blame foreigners for the shortage of social houses when the country would rather build student accommodation everywhere like mushrooms? You see, through traveling, I came to understand that it is a national sport. It seems like every society has a group the media and politicians loves to blame for various issues. And nowadays, whenever a crime is committed, it seems like some people prioritize the criminal country of origin over the crime itself and the punishment reserved for that crime. It's as if to say the crime is acceptable as long as the criminal isn't a foreigner, which implies that they can tolerate a crime as long as it is committed by an indigenous person, a national, rather than a foreigner. And that's wrong.
We, ni nini?